So thanks to David Campbell there, who's behind the scenes managing the session for us. So just a reminder of the format, we've got about an hour and 15 minutes or so. We'll have presentations from Catherine Octavio, and Maria Teresa will be leading a discussion around the work that they're talking about. If you want to ask questions, you can use the Q&A box or the chat box as well, and I'll be moderating those questions and feeding them back into the panelists towards the end of the session. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Maria Teresa to introduce our panelists and the idea for this particular session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thanks you all and 7 Insider and Photo Wings for this continued collaboration. As Paul was mentioning, this is the third series of something about we've been doing in the past 3 years, and this time is called Visualizing the Climate Crisis. We always have been trying to explore in what ways the climate change can be visualized and how can we involve the large public into a more general conversation. And also how can we really involve people in being active part of the change we want to activate. This series will start with we decided to start with a visual journalist or an evidence-based researcher that every time will be joined by a professional operating in different disciplines. This time we have Octavio Aburto, which is a scientist, but we can open to other disciplines that could be policy making, education, media, architecture, social innovation, and so on. The point is, how can we enlarge our knowledge? How can we get out of each other's bubble in order to trying to mix knowledge and create hybrid new models for communicating climate change and really involve a public in the conversation, interpretation, and understanding on the ways they can be involved in the change we want to put into place. So how can we move from inspiration to actually action? And also there are possible tangible actions and solutions we can put in place in order to see people really be part and not only a viewer of what's happening. Today we start the series with a specific topic. Actually, the whole series will be also different from the previous one, where we will actually get under the understanding of the multifaceted themes related to climate change. So probably it's easier for people to understand when they can identify a specific topic, and it's easier for them to understand what we're talking about. So we'll start with ocean acidification today, and sometimes if you see some research, they are often associated to also ocean warming, and we probably talk about the difference, but the most important part is that the two events are in a way intertwined. So speaking of ocean acidification, I'll do just a very brief introduction so then I can set the talk today. So by ocean acidification, we mean a change in the pH of the water, which is caused by the rising level of CO2, which we know that by increasing the CO2 in the atmosphere, about 30% of this CO2 are absorbed by the oceans, causing this change in the chemistry, and so in the chemistry and the pH of the water. So what happens when this happens? That there is a real damage to the seashells and coral skeleton and oysters, clams, and corals, and so when these organisms are at risk, the entire food web is also at risk. So while we might think that corals, in the specific case, because we've invited Catherine that works a lot with the problem related to corals, while they are present in almost like 1% of the sea, in the world, like they're present for 100% of the surface, they are responsible for circa 25% of biodiversity. So the point is, can we have a healthy planet without biodiversity, or can we have healthy people without healthy oceans? The question is pretty rhetorical, but it's very important to understand how this topic is narrated. How can we show the connection of things? How can different professionals can work together in a way to create new models and new narration, new visuals, in order to make people involved in the conversation. So I have the pleasure today to have in our first panel on visualizing climate issues, Octavio Aburto, which is a professional and research scientist, as well as a National Geographic explorer and a professional photographer. He'll tell us more about his bio and what he does. And Catherine Jack is a British photographer living and working in the Philippines, and she's also collaborated with scientists at the University of the Philippine Marine Science Institute at the Coral Reef Lab at the Southampton University. So I'll start with so thank you so much for joining us, first of all. I'll start with you, Octavio, if it's okay for you. And I'll start with probably a good news. I've read that a few days ago, there's been a signature of the High Seas Treaty, which aims at kind of saving or protecting 30% of the seas by the 2030. And so this, like, it's a good news. This is the first question for you, I guess. On the paper is a good news, but in general, I would like to ask you if you could tell us more about what you do in terms of with your work and the issue of ocean acidification. Is this treaty, in your opinion, going to help? And tell us more about your work and your ambition and objectives in terms of the scientific research you carry out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria Teresa, for this invitation, Catherine, Paul. And well, my name is Octavio Aburto. I am from Mexico, but in the last 20 years, I have been living here in California, in San Diego. I am a professor in Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and I have dedicated my research and my photography work to precisely inspire or try to inspire more people to care about what we are facing. And for sure, what you mentioned is this treaty, this new treaty. I think it's good news, but we need to push more. We need to be involved in order to just not sign a treaty and everybody forgets, and we later think that everything will be fixed, but actually it requires our involvement in order to change this situation. And I prepared some slides to basically introduce what you mentioned and what I do related with marine sciences. And I think something that is very, very important is to mention that we receive from the ocean a lot of services and goods. Not only 60 or 70% of the oxygen that we breathe comes from the ocean, that it's very important, but also food, also many other resources, including recreational resources. Yes, more and more often we see tourism activities in the ocean, and as you see in this picture, it could be really fascinating. The ocean, it could be very support many parts of our life. However, as you mentioned, we have been not treating the ocean in the right way. We have a huge overfishing or overexploitation of the oceans. what you see here is what is called a spawning aggregation of fish that basically the majority of the species congregate to reproduce. And if you find these spots in very few time, you can extract a lot of this life. And this is basically one of the big problems that we have in fisheries in the ocean, and why we are seeing the collapse of many of these resources. And in this other picture, you can see a beautiful mangrove that was destroyed in just one weekend because this company, urban company, or this company that builds homes, later put all this infrastructure. And mangroves provide a lot of a habitat for many of the resources that we know, like fish or blue crabs. So it's very important, a lot of big tragedy, what is happening with these wetland ecosystems, but also mangroves are very important to sequester carbon from the atmosphere. And right now we are seeing this big issue related with also the deforestation of the Amazon, that is the sargassum, this macroalgae that floats in the Atlantic Ocean. And we used to know these sargassum seas in the northern part of the Atlantic, but now there is the formation of a sargassum sea in the south part of the Atlantic, mainly because the runoff, all the nitrate and phosphates that the agriculture in Brazil is using is triggering the growth of this macroalgae. And this macroalgae now is traveling to the Caribbean Ocean and basically destroying the beaches in many countries, including Mexico. This is a picture in Mexico, and the impact, the economic impact in these communities is very, very high. So we are seeing as well these droughts, these big changes at the planetary level. And as you mentioned, everything is related with the CO2 emissions that we have been putting in the atmosphere. Now we have it very clear, we have all the technology, or we have all the knowledge to understand that this is the main reason of what we are seeing, all these changes in the planet. And of course, it's not there are different angles of these issues, but for sure there are a lot of inequalities in this topic. Yes, there are countries, or there are people inside or in each of these countries that we release more CO2, and this release of CO2 is also correlated with the basically the social economic structure that we have. So the richest people are the ones that are emitting more CO2 to the atmosphere. So this is something that we need to consider. This CO2 is being absorbed by the ocean. So more than 30% of these CO2 emissions are absorbed by the ocean. And this is why we are talking about all these problems, because now we also have the technology to understand what is happening in the ocean. What you see here are called algal floats. This technology, these devices can submerge, they operate automatically. They go down 2,000 meters. They start recording temperature, salinity, and of course depth. And then they go back to the surface, stay one day in the surface, transmitting the data to satellites, and they go down again. And if you are wondering how many of these devices right now we have in the ocean, they are everywhere. They are everywhere, so we know what is happening, not only with the satellites on land, we also know what is happening in the oceans. And the scary picture is that you can see the depth the left side of the graph. So from zero, from the surface all the way to 700 meters in depth. And in theory, the temperature should be almost the same from the surface all the way to the 700 meters. But as you can see in the red line, now there has been a warmer effect even to these depths. And this is changing everything. As you mentioned, these CO2 emissions are changing the chemistry of the ocean, especially because the CO2 is absorbed by the ocean. This CO2 together with water basically form carbonic acid. And this carbonic acid is released or is changing biocarbonate ions and then hydrogen ions. And this is the reason why the ocean is getting more acidic because all these ions in the ocean. And what that means is that if you put this scale, that is how we measure the acidity, the pH of the water, the water, our blood, as you can see here in the graph, is around 7, around 8. And you can have, like, for example, bleach or drain cleaner in the 13 or 14 in the basic side of the scale. But in the acidic side of the scale, we have the stomach acid, the lemon, the vinegar. And what is happening is that we are changing all this chemistry of the water. And as you mentioned, this is impacting many resources, including corals that we will see with Catherine. And just to finalize my presentation, I think, as you mentioned, the good news is that we are talking more about this and we are pushing for more involvement of many people. I still believe that the problem is that we haven't been care enough about the biodiversity of this planet. All these species like us should have the same rights to live in a healthy planet, and we need to start changing the way how we relate with nature. And the most important thing, this is an example that I'm just put from a scientific literature about the recovery of many forests, because the majority of the people they can see a change in their backyard, in their terrestrial ecosystems that they see all the time. It is more difficult to see it in the ocean, but this publication that is showing in this figure 4 forests that have been recovered when they eliminate the human pressures. The same things can happen or have happened in the ocean. This is a reef that I have been, I started visiting when I was studying marine biology back in 30 years ago. Fishermen basically overfish the reefs, or the reef in this case. They eliminate the groupers, first they eliminate the sharks, then the groupers, then the snappers, and basically the reefs were like this. And 25 years ago, they realized that they need to do something, and they decided to protect the whole reef. And in just 10 years, that reef moved from that picture to this picture. All the species that they were fishing, when they stopped fishing, this is not rocket science, but when they stopped fishing, they came back. Now, not only you can see groupers, jacks, and snappers in this, as you can see in this picture, now you can see many sharks in this reef. This example is very tiny, so we need to do bigger things. Here is Mario Castro, is one of the fishermen that started this movement in that place that is called Cabo Pulmo. And if you have the opportunity to go there in Mexico, it's unbelievable. And together with other family members, they were able to make that change. And every time that I visit this place, I see more and more people that want to, they are very excited about what is happening in that place. And this is what should happen with all the treaties that are being signed right now. In December 2022, in the COP15 in Montreal, there was another agreement about saving 30% of the terrestrial, inland, water, coastal, and marine areas that should be protected. And all the countries that signed this treaty are committed to do that. And also business people were in the signature of that treaty. But there are countries that didn't sign, like for example, the US didn't sign this treaty. And as you mentioned, this other treaty was signed last week in New York, basically pushing for the protection of the high seas, that is basically beyond the economic exclusive zone of the countries. All the blue light that you see there, well, the darker blue there in the map are the high seas, and we need to protect as well 30% of the high seas. So in summary, I think it is possible to recover the ocean, it is possible to recover the planet, but we need to be pushed for more involvement. And this is a picture as well that I took in Cabo Pumo after the recovery of that site. And as you can see here, you have the fish that they recover, they are happy, they are mating, but also the diver that you see in this picture is the son of Mario Castro, one of the fishermen that started this movement to protect Cabo Pumo. And now David Castro, that is his name, he wants to really protect Cabo Pumo and protect sharks. So it was a mind shift in how fishermen, and in this case, the people from Cabo Pumo start thinking. So we need to start thinking in another way as well.
Thank you, Ottavio. Thank you for such an insightful presentation. It was really powerful to see these images and the data as well. Also interesting to see that the country that is the most responsible for the production of CO2 doesn't sign the treaty anyway. This is another story. Thank you again. Catherine, thank you so much for joining us. I would ask you to present yourself and your work, what you do, your creative practice, what's your ambition in terms of your photographic practice, in terms of addressing the issue and the specific topic you work around. And if you want to share also your view on the latest UN treaty, please feel free to do so. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria Teresa and Paul and David, for this opportunity to be here. And it's so nice to be here talking with Ottavio on this topic today. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. So is that fine? Great. So, hi, my name is Catherine Jack, and I'm a photographer. I'm originally from the UK, but I've been working and living in Palawan, the westernmost province of the Philippines, since 2004. So I'd just like to introduce you to the place where I live and what I'm working on. So Palawan is an archipelago of 1,780 islands and coral reefs, and it's a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. So that is a place that we can see as a kind of microcosm or a model for restoring balance between humankind and the natural world. So through my photography, I explore interrelationships between people, culture, and the environment. And I see Palawan as a place that really reflects humankind's deep relationships with the natural environment and also reveals some of the complex interconnectedness of our world. So this image shows a fisherman standing in the doorway of his solar-powered family home. So coral reef ecosystems are really the foundation of life here. People rely on them heavily for food, livelihood, and they play a big role in protecting the coastlines of the islands as well. And Palawan is home to an ancient culture. It was among the first islands to be inhabited in Southeast Asia around 50,000 years ago. So through the centuries, close bonds and a deep knowledge of the ocean has been passed down through the generations. And even though Palawan is now home to a growing population of migrants from all over the Philippines, many people's lives here still closely follow the changing seasons, shifting winds, and lunar cycles, such as this indigenous man who's a spear fisherman and has just returned home from spearfishing at moonrise. Palawan is home to incredible biodiversity. So scientific reports show that it's one of the richest locations within the Coral Triangle, and which is the global center of marine biodiversity. And in 2010, a team of marine biologists came here and surveyed reefs in northern Palawan, which is where I'm currently working. And in just 2 weeks of research, they encountered 447 species of corals and another 40 yet to be identified. So I began my work here in Palawan on Tubataha Reefs, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site in the Sulu Sea. I was a volunteer photographer and videographer for the World Wildlife Fund for their research and monitoring team. And this meant photographing quadrats and making videos while swimming slowly across transect lines. So the photographs I made would be analyzed by marine scientists to see how the coral was responding to its protected status. So this is like links to what Octavio was talking about earlier about how areas of the ocean that have been destroyed by overfishing or the use of destructive fishing techniques can recover if they are given protected status. So yeah, this reef was in a very bad condition from that overfishing and also from the 1998 coral bleaching event. So the reports were positive. The protection showed that both the biomass and the biodiversity on the reef were increasing within the park area. But then the next expedition that I joined was with the WWF climate change research team. So from them, I saw a different story and different predictions for the future. In 2014, I began my long-term photographic project, Palawan Seas. The aim of this work, which is still ongoing, is to document and communicate human relationships with the ocean. And this project receives fiscal sponsorship through the Blue Earth Alliance. So as you can see here on the project website, Palawan Seas explores ocean relationships through 9 different chapters. So I'll just take you through them briefly. So there's land, the ocean, people of the sea, fishing, indigenous life, communities, coral portraits, threats to corals, such as this crown of thorns starfish, which we also saw in Octavio's image earlier, and coral conservation and rehabilitation, which I feel is the really important next stage of my work, is producing more of these kind of images which show what action people are already taking to help protect and conserve the ocean and rehabilitate coral communities. So I call these kinds of images like seeds of hope. So these are the main climate change threats to the ocean. Today, we're talking about how we can visualize or communicate through the visual language of photography, the way in which the climate crisis is affecting the global ocean. So we have ocean warming, acidification, and deoxygenation, which is also linked to ocean warming. So I'm sure that Octavio will go more into the details of all these different topics. So in my work so far, I've mainly looked at the problem of ocean warming and its effect on corals, since they are the foundation of life in Palawan. Corals have a life-sustaining symbiotic relationship with microscopic algae, which live in their tissues. And this partnership is powered by photosynthesis. So it's mutually beneficial in many ways, and it's the source of most of the corals' food. So as you can see in this picture, corals also have tentacles, and they can grab food like from the ocean itself, but they're actually getting the bulk of their food and energy from this symbiotic relationship with the photosynthetic algae. So the issue with this at the moment is that this symbiotic relationship is very sensitive to temperature. So when corals are exposed to higher than normal temperatures, and that depends on what kind of corals they are and what part of the world they live in. But if they're exposed to temperatures which are higher than normal for them, combined with too much UV light, the corals will release the symbiotic algae, and then they will begin to starve. So in 2019, when I was photographing a reef in northeastern Palawan, I noticed these mushroom corals glowing. So mushroom corals are particularly sensitive to temperature, and this phenomenon called fluorescing is a sign of heat stress. So corals actually get their amazing colors from two sources. Firstly, from the symbiotic algae, and secondly, from fluorescent proteins. So corals produce fluorescent proteins as a kind of, simply put, as a kind of sunscreen to protect themselves from high energy solar radiation. So once I became aware that I was seeing signs of heat stress, I joined this group. It's a citizen science group called Philippine Coral Bleaching Watch. And I started submitting regular reports from my work. So this is an amazing project by the University of the Philippines Marine Science Institute. And as you can see here, they're active on social media. They issue warnings when there are, when temperatures are high enough for a long enough period that there would be chance of there being a bleaching event. And they also created, you can see on the right side, this amazing app, which makes it very easy for anyone who's in the water, like be they divers or snorkelers or locals, to submit a report directly to the scientists of what they're seeing, and they can put in their GPS coordinates, or they can just move the pin on the map to where they are, and they can also submit photographs or just written descriptions if that's all they have. So this is an amazing program that I've become involved in, and it's just helping a lot to monitor coral bleaching in the Philippines. So then during the 2020 lockdown, I revisited the South Sea Reef Rehab Coral Garden, which is a project here in Palawan, which I've been documenting for 4 years. It's a marine protected area, and it's also a place where they actively do coral rehabilitation. This is what I saw. So it was September, which is during the southwest monsoon. So supposed to be a cooler period of the year, and also a tropical storm was actually passing over us. But despite the monsoon and the storm, the area was experiencing a marine heat wave, and the water temperature was as high as 33 degrees. So corals were fluorescing and bleaching all over the reef. And you can see here, like the reason that this photograph is a little bit blurry in the middle is that the cold water from the rain coming down from the storm is not mixing with the very warm water of the sea, and it's creating a thermocline, which creates this blurry effect where the two bodies of water don't mix. So previous mass coral bleaching events in the Philippines had been linked to El Nino years. So El Nino years are warmer, so that the seas are warmer, and bleaching is more likely to occur. So 2020 was the first time that a mass coral bleaching event occurred in the Philippines during enso-neutral conditions, which means like it was neither El Nino or La Nina, which is the colder phase, which we've actually just finished a colder phase of 3 years since 2020. This is the first time that mass coral bleaching event occurred with no El Nino conditions. So marine scientists here are really concerned that this is like setting a precedent for more frequent and severe bleaching events to come in the future. So I began to read more about coral fluorescing and bleaching, and I reached out to Professor Jörg Weidenmann at the Coral Reef Lab at the University of Southampton, which is one place where they're really like studying this in depth and have some of the latest research about this in the world. So it was really interesting talking to them. I learned so much. You know, we had like Zoom conversations, and then eventually when I was able to go back to the UK, I visited them. So I learned so much from the scientists who were studying coral fluorescing at the Coral Reef Lab, and they invited me to be part of this exhibition called Bleached. It was a group exhibition all about corals and climate change. And yeah, in the future, we plan that some of my images of coral reefs here in Palawan could be used for their research and teaching purposes. And yeah, it's a real collaboration, because then their knowledge of what's going on in my pictures is really informing and giving like new direction to my work. So yeah, so I'm gonna wrap up now. I'm ending with this image that we used to share the talk, and this is actually in a marine protected area. And yep, again, linking to what Octavio was talking about earlier, this was a year, another area that had been really decimated by different types of destructive fishing, such as the use of dynamite, like blast fishing, and the use of sodium cyanide to poison fish and also poison the reef. So this was an area that was, you know, almost devoid of life and was able to be revived. So it offers us hope. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you very much for the extension and the details you shared with us. Ottavio, I'll get back to you. From a scientific point of view, what are the messages, the key messages you think we should address to the large public in order to really see some tangible actions that can really improve oceans life? So not in terms of like in very simple language, you know, in a very simple way. If a person is not interested or doesn't know about ocean acidification, what is the message we should try to convey to the large public that could really address this issue?
Well, I think one of the important things that I always try to mention is that we are facing with two problems that it could be related, but actually are not the same. One is climate change, everything that is happening with our activities releasing CO2 to this planet. This is one. And the other one is the loss of biodiversity, and that includes the different species that live in this planet, but how these species or the ecosystems that these species form together. Why these two things should be separated? Because solving the climate change issue will require a vision in our economic system, in fighting against all these companies that want to continue selling fossil fuels, and it will be a battle in certain arena. The losing biodiversity, it can be solved by all of us starting now, starting after we finish this webinar. We can start solving the problem with the loss of biodiversity. And why this is important? Because I have been science, if you do the maths or if you do the science, if right now we will have all the forests that we have lost in the last 250 years after the Industrial Revolution, all these forests, all these healthy forests should be mitigating all the CO2 that we are releasing every year in this planet. That doesn't mean that we should be releasing all this CO2. We should reduce that, the production of that emissions. But what I'm trying to say is that if we have healthy ecosystem, we can mitigate all this issue. And the same thing happened with the ocean and the ocean acidification. Corals, like those that Catherine showed in her pictures, some coral reefs, the coral reefs that have all the elements, all the fish, all the trophic groups, all the species that should be there in that ecosystems, that coral reefs are fighting better the acidification and the climate change. These areas that have all these elements are resisting, they are more stronger, and they can resist better all these and mitigate better all these impacts. So we should tell people we need to stop losing species and losing biodiversity. And this is our first priority. And the second is to go and change many things that we have in the economic system to don't continue consume fossil fuels. But there are two issues that we need to solve in a different ways.
Yeah, but in terms of like real concrete actions, what can we say? I mean, not as a systemic point of view, like individual, like the people, like the wide public that is not informed. It's like, what is the single action that a lot of people can put in place that can really have a tangible effect?
Individually, there are two actions that I always mention. First, let's consume less of everything. We don't need too many things in this life. Let's consume less. And second, let's have a better diet, especially people that eat a lot of red meat. This is one of the big threats for this planet. Is one of the major sectors that emit a lot of CO2 to the atmosphere, not only because cows and all these animals need more space. Everything that we feed them also requires or are emitting a lot of CO2. So individually, these are the two main things that we can do: reduce our consumption of everything and have a better diet.
Wonderful. Thank you. Catherine, I wanted to ask you, we can probably say that among all the issues related to climate change or loss of biodiversity, probably the topic of ocean acidification or ocean warming are the most, not the easiest to visualize from a really practical point of view. And in this sense, probably corals and their health are the most tangible in terms of being able to show real effects on an healthy environment. So as a visual storyteller, have you come across this issue of being difficult to visualize, like an issue that you have found or you've asked yourself, how can I visualize these things that is not so visible? And at the same time, it would be good if you could tell us about your relationship with science. So how this relationship impacts, if it does, the development of your projects or the aesthetics or the distribution of your work. So in other words, could you tell us from a photographic point of view, visual storyteller, how your what is the starting point of your work? If it's research, if it's the relationship with science, if it's a personal experience, whatever it is. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it is very challenging to represent these issues visually, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. It just takes some like creativity and imagination. And I would say that the science is really helpful to me because it helps me understand the issues. For example, when I saw those little mushroom corals that were glowing, and I was really intrigued, but I knew that this was something I could research and learn about. And then that definitely guided my work going forwards. Once I started to learn more about coral fluorescing, then I was able to start making more images showing corals experiencing some kind of heat stress, even if it wasn't like a shocking image of a reef that was totally fluorescing or totally bleaching, some more like nuanced images. So I started to see the colors of the corals as a kind of visual language that I could then which would allow me to translate the science into like striking images. So I started doing that. And then when the 2020 marine heat wave came, I was ready because I understood the processes. So I was able to photograph it more effectively, like with that knowledge and understanding. So yes, it is. It's really challenging, like especially the topic of ocean acidification, because how can we see that? It's corals would, in a more acidic ocean, corals would start to suffer from something called coral porosis, which is similar to like humans having osteoporosis. So it's the calcium carbonate, which is becoming less dense. I'm sure Octavio can give us more details on that if people are interested, but
it kind of feels like it's the same that it happens to human bodies.
Exactly. So I love drawing parallels between the human experience and the experience of coral animals, because we have a lot in common. So that was really helpful to imagine it that way. But then how do you show that in an image? I haven't quite figured that out yet. And also just coming back to a point that Octavio made about areas that are protected being more resistant to other stressors like ocean acidification or warming seas. That's something which I also try to include or portray in my work, and just thinking about the two factors that we're discussing at the moment, like the ocean acidification and the warming seas. Like if you combine those two, like if you have a coral which is already suffering from coral porosis, it is struggling to grow and to reproduce. So it doesn't have as much energy to thrive. So it's this like combination of factors, and we can also like relate that to our own human experience. When we're bombarded by different factors, we're much more susceptible to illness. So yeah.
Interesting. Sorry to interrupt you. This is an interesting insight, actually, into a possible narration to show people really the connection of the things, because people tend to get more worried and sensible and attent if they think that whatever happens somewhere else or in the ocean actually has an effect on their own health. It's probably what moves people in really feeling the hurry to do something. So it's an interesting idea and insight into a way we could narrate the problem and the issues of the oceans when we actually make a comparison and a comparative kind of narration with human life and body and health.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the aims of my work. Is I want to show people, you know, if they're in London, in Europe, in the US, that you know, these coral reefs are being impacted by the everyday lives of people who are, you know, mostly located far away. So I would really, my aim is to create those connections, like between that, so that people can realize how their lifestyle, you know, Octavio talked a little bit about how we can adjust our lifestyle to improve the situation, but how their lifestyle is actually, you know, affecting these marine animals.
In fact, thank you. This is a nice assist to the question I wanted to ask Ottavio, which is also a part of the reason why we started this work with Everything is Connected. Is like I believe that in the global narration of the climate change or all the issues related to the environment, what is missing is the connection of the things. And we know that climate change is very true more on a local level. So what happens in a place is not true in another place. So how can we really show or what is the message that we could portray from a scientific point of view that shows that what happens in the ocean, in the Atlantic Ocean and in the corals in the Philippines is still relevant for pollen lifestyles in Europe or in another side of the world. So the Philippines or vice versa. It's like it would be good if you could tell us a little bit more. First of all, what do you think about this connection and how important will be to show people that there are this connection, and then how can we really do that?
Yes, for sure. We need to start thinking that the actions needs to be local actions. And as I mentioned, and I am seeing here some questions that the audience is asking us, but if we are able to recover the ecosystems that are around the places that we live, I think this will improve our mitigation and our future, or a better future in the next years. But now what we are seeing, especially with climate change, with ocean acidification and ocean deoxygenation as well. This is a very difficult word to pronounce. All these are being connected in a larger scales. Like I was mentioning the problem of the sargassum in the Atlantic. Everything that is happening in the Amazon is now impacting the Caribbean. Several countries are being impacted starting this month or around this month, all the way to summer. By the growth of the sargassum, and everything is related with the deforestation of the Amazon. And the deforestation of the Amazon is connected with the consumption of meat and soy in Europe, and especially in Europe, and especially in US. And again, these US people that have a better income, larger income, they can travel and use planes to visit Philippines and other places to dive, yes? And at the same time, they, with all these activities, tourist activities, they are able to, yes, increase the income of that communities, these villages, but at the same time, they bring garbage and they bring mounts that they need to feed. So the local people start catching more fish from the ocean to feed the tourists. So everything is connected, and what we need to start thinking, and this is the reason why I am trying to separate these two topics. One is the climate change, and one is the biodiversity, because if we, at the local level, we maintain healthy ecosystems, I think we will be able to mitigate better and to not only to maintain healthy the ecosystems, also restore the ecosystem that we have lost at the local level. We will be more able to push or to fight this battle about climate change and the consumption of the fossil fuels, because we will need to adapt in a different way. And so yes, we are connected and we need to understand these connections, but for sure what it matters is what we are doing at the local level, especially related with the loss of biodiversity.
Okay, thank you so much. Catherine, just briefly, you mentioned before that as a photographer, you try to show the connection of things you're really aware, and it's probably one of the main kind of signature of your work, showing exactly the interconnectedness of all the things. Do you think as if we are asking too much to photographers to do this kind of effort to understand how the work can actually be satisfying or effective or big enough to show all the complexity of the connections that Octavio was talking about? I mean, we're not talking, it's just, these are big issues, and probably, again, as you know, I mean, I think that there is not one single discipline that can solve issues, but of course, we are talking here mainly about the visualization of the issues. And I wonder if from a visual storyteller, your point of view, is it too much to ask, or is something that you really work hard on understanding how to do, and you think is even possible?
I do think it's possible, yeah. I feel that as a universal visual language, photography is the right medium to do this. It's not the only way. Like, I mean, I feel that you know, all everyone from all fields should be working on this. But I do feel that photography has a very important role in communicating these issues, and partly, I mean, I guess there's two main ways that I see photography can do this. And firstly, through creating emotional connections. So photography can create an emotional connection across distance and time. And secondly, if we're thinking about a series of images or photo stories, that's another way that through sequencing, we can talk about connections between different topics or different issues. So yeah, I do feel it's important that photography plays that role. I also think it's possible for photographers themselves to collaborate. You know, you don't have to travel across the world if you can find someone to collaborate with in order to draw connections between your work. So yeah, I do feel strongly that it is possible. Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. I would like to ask you a final question to both of you. If we were going to leave people with a message of hope, what that would be? And is it realistic to think that if we put in place specific actions, some of which have been told by you two in these talks, and collectively involving millions of people, could we really revert the trend and improve the situation of the oceans? I mean, Octavio already in part replied to that, but why is not happening? What is missing for this to happen? Because it feels like when we talk among people that are kind of already knowledgeable about issues, it feels like we know what we should do, but it's not really happening. What is the thing that should happen in order for us to put in place this process or a series of action that can really involve people in helping to revert the trend? Octavio, do you want to start?
Yes, in my opinion, we need to tell people that we have understood nature in the wrong way. That means that always we have thought, especially after Darwin's discovery in Galapagos, how this life compete between them in order to survive. This is not the case. Nature doesn't work through competition. Nature actually works through cooperation. And in order to reach all these ecosystems that we see in their mature state, so big forests, jungles, mangroves, coral reefs, all the species that are living in these ecosystems are cooperating, they are not competing. And what we have been doing is creating Darwinian societies where the economic system tell us or push us to compete, and basically with this idea that the better is the one that will survive. And in other kind of societies, like how Alexander von Humboldt was saying, societies that cooperate could really mimic the way that ecosystems work. So we should be mimicking that idea. And the only way to go forward and move forward and battle and basically stop this crisis, and I think it is possible to stop this crisis, is by cooperating not only in our neighborhood, also between countries and between people. This is, for me, the only way. And we need to understand that nature, it works in that way. Not nature really, very few part of nature is the competition. The main part is the cooperation.
Thank you. Catherine?
I would wholeheartedly agree with Octavio. I really feel that what we need to move towards here is like a systemic change, kind of like a paradigm shift. And we need to be doing that within our modes of communication as well, in the language that we're using, and the visual language that we're using. So yeah, a systemic change, but I would love for people to feel empowered to take these actions themselves and not wait for the system to change. I feel that we all need to participate, you know, scientists, photographers, whatever profession you are working in. So yeah, I feel, I mean, all the reports that are reaching us now are just telling us that we need to take rapid action as soon as possible, and everyone needs to get involved.
Thank you so much, guys. It's been very insightful. I probably will leave these 10 minutes to the public questions. Paul?
Yeah. So we have a couple of questions. I'll queue up. So from Ted Ostrowski, is asking about, so he said that Captain Paul Watson, the Sea Shepherd organization, says if the oceans die, we will die. So just really wanted to ask both of you, what's your opinion about Sea Shepherd in particular? They're in alignment with your vision of goals. And then more broadly, what do you think about collaboration with some of these other conservation organizations? Is that a way forward? Are they doing good work? Or are they also kind of in this contested space? So really, what's your opinion about, I guess, Greenpeace, Sea Shepherd, that kind of other organizations, are the ones we should be following, are the ones we should be backing? What kind of work are they doing? For either of you.
I mean, I think Ted is right, or in this case, Paul Watson was right by saying that if the oceans die, we will die. Well, just 60 or 70% of the oxygen that we breathe come from the ocean. However, for me, the vision that his organization has, it doesn't represent what we should be doing, because again, it's kind of the good guys against the bad guys. Yes, for him and for other organizations, in theory, there are people that are good people and there are other people that are bad. And I think it's just a context. Yes, sometimes fishermen, they need to fish in the way that they need to fish because poverty, because many other reasons that actually sometimes are not created in that countries. And people like the Captain Paul Watson, their countries are the ones that have been producing these inequalities in other countries. So I don't think the solution is bad against good people. And I think as I mentioned, the cooperation, the collaboration, not only between citizens, also, I mean, scientists, they need to cooperate beyond country borders in order to solve all these situations. So yes and no. I agree with one part, not with the rest of the question.
And then the other question, oh, sorry, Catherine, you want us to come in on that as well?
Oh, just briefly, I was just going to say, yeah, I would agree with Octavio, certainly about the ocean and us, and that, yeah, I also agree that like things are never black and white. And I love to collaborate with NGOs and conservation organizations and projects, and I just kind of research and create good relationships with the team that I'm working on. I'm quite careful about who I work with, so that's how I navigate those kind of situations.
Paul, there are more questions also in the...
Yes, I'm just coming to those now, yeah. So another question, sort of in a sense, trying to unpack the complexities of these chicken and egg, really. So it's a question around, Octavio, you're saying we should communicate the issues about loss of biodiversity first and foremost, but isn't biodiversity to some extent exacerbated or caused by climate change? So kind of, what comes first, really? Which battle is the most important? Is it the issues around climate change more broadly, or is it the specifics of biodiversity?
Yes, as I mentioned, I think if the problem is that we are thinking that humans can invent a machine to capture CO2, and then we will continue using the amount of fossil fuels that we have been consuming, and actually is growing this consumption after the pandemic. We came back and we are consuming more fossil fuels. So I don't think this needs to be seen in that way. The first thing is that we have machines already that the nature created, trees. and they can sequester the CO2, and they can storage the CO2 in the soil. So why we are not putting more investment in stopping deforestation rather than think that we will reforest? We can do it, and we need to do it, but we need to start by stopping the deforestation. Especially because if you plant a tree today, it will take 10 or 50 or 500 years to start sequestering what they are sequestering right now. So we need to really solve the biodiversity extinction or the loss of biodiversity this year, next year. We need to start by stopping that threat and restoring this ecosystem as soon as possible. And I think the second priority or a parallel priority is sure to continue the battle against the consumption of the fossil fuels.
Great, thanks. So just to close, Bank has got a question about how to break into conservation wildlife photography where you haven't got any work of that nature in your portfolio. That's a huge question, I think, beyond what we can talk about today in the few minutes we've got left. But I think what we could mention, and perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about, is the Emerging League of the International League of Conservation Photographers and how that works, what's its membership like? So, what is that organization doing? Is that a good place to join? Is that something that you can join if you're a photographer working on these kind of issues? So I know both of you, I think, are members of that. So it'd be great just to get a bit more insight into what that is and what work it's doing and whether it's something that one can follow or one can join. Catherine, maybe you want to start on that?
Yeah, so I joined the Emerging League of the International League of Conservation Photographers last year. And I've been following their work for many, many years. I mean, they're just an incredible group of photographers and very, very knowledgeable about the environment and conservation issues. It took me a few years to get my portfolio together to apply. And then I was accepted, and it's just been such an incredible experience. Like since I joined them, they're just really incredible mentoring opportunities and just a very supportive and uplifting group of people. It's really nice to be able to talk to people who have the same cares and concerns, or could maybe help you with an issue that you're experiencing. You're wondering, like, what is the best way to go about a project or to go about distribution. So it's just especially for someone like me, like being based in a very, very remote place, it's just a really wonderful community to be part of.
Thank you. There is a question by Joya Kass in the chat table. I just want to say that in the past series we've been organizing, there are a few other talks we had, which were about empathy and connection in environmental storytelling, or the use of public space, or even alternative aesthetics to communicate climate change. And I think in these talks you can find some answers to your question, because it's not just a matter of aesthetics or conceptual or creative work, because it's all about getting out of the usual channels by which documentary photography is portrayed, because again, going to the masses means mainly going to the public space. And of course, when you go to the public space, the target is so wide, it's so broad, that some aesthetics will work with some people, other aesthetics will work with other people. So you can't really draw a line and say this is the exact aesthetic that works, but definitely creating empathy and connection and really showing the care, as you're saying, is very important. And the channels, the new channels you can put in place in order for people to get closer to the story are the most important thing, in my opinion, rather than focusing on the aesthetics. I hope.
Yeah, and if I can add something to that answer, is that most of the stories that we have tell about the climate crisis or climate change are stories about somebody else or someone else,
Exactly.
not us. And maybe the climate crisis is affecting all of us, and we should start telling our own story, and maybe that will start connecting us better, because sometimes, most of the time, is, oh, this is happening to him, to her, to them, but what is happening with us? And everybody is being affected by this crisis, so we should start pushing for personal stories. Yes,
Absolutely.
But I think that's a great place to end. We're right on time there. We have got a couple of questions more, but they're really essentially asking questions about the whole theme of this series of talks. So I think the answer to the question about what can we do to catch attention is to join in the next sessions in the future and see what else we might be able to provide. So I'd just like to thank very much Maria Teresa, obviously, and Catherine Octavio for fascinating discussion today. And it's very interesting to drill into this really sort of this undersea world and learn about that. And it's been really, really fascinating. And thanks very much to all of our audience. If they're with us till the end, thank you very much. And of course, thank you to Devon Insider for hosting us today, and to Furtherwinds for supporting this whole program. Thank you very much to Everything is Connected as well. And obviously, thanks to the University of London. So thank you, everybody. I just want to say goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank
and
you.
This will be available as a recording.
What, sorry? And Octavio, thank you so much for joining us today. And of course, beside all the thanking notes from Paul, thank you so much. And we will come back probably next month with the next episode.